So, Apple has just announced new iPads that it would have you believe, I'm not disagreeing necessarily, I'm just saying, Apple would have you believe are a magical solution to problems you didn't even know you had. They could be right. And also, actually, I know I'm right about this. Any second now, it will have already started before the end of this sentence. Every pixel of the new iPads and their screens, every atom of their construction will be examined and praised and criticised, and it'll be people with stopwatches, slide rules, and actually also, I suppose, more technical knowledge than I have will be examining these things. But call me obsessed. I just want to know, are the new iPads any good for you and me as writers? Hello, I'm William Gallagher and this is 58 Keys, which, as always, is for writers like you and me who use and who write well on Macs, iPhones, and also iPads. Do subscribe and like. I never know where that button is, but like is good. Or support 58 Keys on Patreon, because there's always so much to talk about. And today, it's iPad all the way. And the Apple Pencil. And the Magic Keyboard, yeah. The pencil. I think you've got better handwriting than I have, haven't you? Listen, I should say there is actually already a quite old 58 Keys episode that sets out to show you in detail how to pick which iPad is right for your needs and your budget. And the thing of it is, the reason I mention it is it's supposed to do that regardless of whenever you buy. So even now with a new one, it should still apply. But who wants to go off and watch a second video? Put a link there if you're chewing over it. Short version is the regular iPad is tremendous for writers. Actually, it's tremendous for everybody. If you bought that, you'd be happy. Actually, you might be very happy because what is now the cheapest iPad, the regular iPad, known in full as the 10th generation one, well, that device hasn't changed. But when it was new last year, it didn't offer enough to make it worth buying over the previous 9th generation iPad, which Apple kept on selling. No. But as of now, today, Apple is no longer selling that 9th generation one, and it's lowered the 10th generation one to start at $349 or £349. But back to the completely new ones. Apple has launched two versions of the top of the range iPad Pro and two of the middle of the range iPad Air. First, the iPad Pro. Actually, speaking of firsts, if the first thing you see as you look around about the iPad Pro is that it costs from $1,000 or from $1,300 or pounds, actually same figures, then it's probably not for you. What's new with the iPad Pro that will make it worthwhile for people who it is for? Well, it starts with the screen. The iPad Pro now has what's called an OLED screen and a nano texture option. And what OLED means is that the colours are brighter, blacks are darker, and also, especially since OLED does all of that without needing the backlight that previous screens did, it's also thinner. Apple is even selling this iPad under the strapline of thin possible. Plus the nano texture option means that if you pay a bit more, you get a screen whose glass is etched in such a way that, well, you can see it fine, but you don't get as much reflected glare back in your face. The screen is the thing with the iPad Pro, except the thing is also that lightness, that thinnerness. And actually what might make a fair few people upgrade, the thing is, it's the processor that drives all of this. Because Apple has launched an M4 processor, at present exclusive in the iPad Pro, and Apple says this is incredibly fast. Well, they would, wouldn't they? But I'm sure it is. I don't think, from what we can see so far, that it's as big a leap as going from Intel to M1 was. And I do know that the extra speed, it's not something you or I would notice as we type. Well, I mean, we'd get the responsiveness, we'd enjoy the seamless feel of thinking of something and it happening. But I doubt we would decisively spot the difference between the M4 in this new iPad Pro and the M2 in the last one. Let's get uselessly specific about numbers, and I do mean uselessly at the moment. I can tell you, like Apple says, M4 is faster than M2, and you can be astounded at the brilliance of my observations there. It's until these devices are actually out in writers' hands, we won't know what they feel like. I mean, we know they'll feel lighter, we know they feel faster, but we won't feel what they're good for. Plus, actually, there's this. It's a convenient simplification and it's an old one, but it still applies. If you need the iPad Pro speed and performance and capabilities, yeah, you already know that you do. I mean, we all want fast iPads, but actually all iPads are fast anyway. If you write on your iPad, browse the web, play videos, read books, any iPad will be good. Actually, no, more than that, any iPad would be very, very good. But if you're making videos, making audio, if you do 3D modeling or frankly things I don't understand in science and maths, yeah, you probably want the iPad Pro. And actually I'd say you want how one version of iPad Pro comes with that larger 12.9-inch screen. You'll want it. I love that screen size. But now, especially in this new range of iPads, there's actually a question over whether you need the iPad Pro to get that screen size, because the regular iPad and the iPad Pro, in between the two rather, there's the iPad Air, and the iPad Air has changed. Now, almost always, the iPad Air has been the sweet spot in the range of iPads for its mix of the price and the performance, really. The new iPad Air costs from $599 or $799 or pounds, depending on the screen size. And that's the thing. This time there is a big extra element, in that there is a big extra element. For the first time in what, more than a decade, the iPad Air now comes in that larger screen size as well. And previously, if you wanted a larger iPad, you had no choice. It was the iPad Pro. Now, well, you have at least a little more choice. You've got two options. With both the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, this is detail again, but you can buy what Apple calls an 11-inch version or a 13-inch version. And it's not quite accurate. I mean, just one example. Yeah, the 13-inch iPad Pro, that is 13 inches diagonally, but the 13-inch iPad Air is 12.9 inches. 11 and 13, it'll do. Only, if I'm not fussed about numbers that are that close, I do care, I am fussed about the size of the screen. To me, the M4 is a curiosity. The details actually of new versions of Video app, Final Cut Pro, and Audio app, Logic Pro, they're very interesting to me. But the standout news of the whole event is that the iPad Air now comes in this larger size. I think it muddies the water a bit. It makes your choice of the right pad a little harder. But we're writers. Where there is nuance, that's where we belong. Plus, we can always write around nuance. So, while actually there is an important consideration that I'm neglecting, let me get to it. Let's you and I summarise the entire iPad range in one go. The iPad Pro suits people who have really demanding work to do. The regular iPad, other end of the scale, suits almost everyone else. The iPad Air sits in the middle. It's a sweet spot. There is also the iPad Mini, but now you're just being awkward. The iPad Mini is a small thing. It's quite old now, getting on for 3 years. It is appealingly small, and it was powerful when it came out. It's just you're paying more for the smaller size. iPad Mini starts at $499. I wouldn't, if you need the size. Here's the thing. I really, really think that comparing specifications of processor names and inch sizes doesn't tell us what we need. You're a writer, I'm a writer. There is no question, for instance, that the right iPad for me ought to be the regular standard iPad, but instead I bought an iPad Pro. I did actually hesitate a lot. It's a couple of years ago now since I bought it, and I think because now things change, I'd bought it a month before, a month after, I could easily have gone for an iPad Air. But at that moment, I believed that the best mix of price and performance for me was the 11-inch iPad Pro. Because while we are writers, and iPads are actually fantastic writing tools, both of us do more than solely write. We have lives, we have work, businesses, plans, hopes, dreams, and also a budget. If there's anything a writer has, it's a budget, which meant that actually my thinking then was, and is now, I'm sure always will be, yes, writing first, but second, my writing business, which includes delivering workshops, making videos, making audios, and then third, the price. I'm not in any way dismissive of what the cost of an iPad is. It's not a casual purchase. But even if the money has to be the deciding factor in the end, it's got to be at the end, because buying an iPad solely because it's the cheap one means you could be wasting all of that money. When I was going through this in 2021, I was conscious that I wanted an iPad that would last me, please, for a very long time, so that I didn't have to keep going through this thing. I didn't have to keep spending the money. I forgot that Apple would make me want to, but that's another story. So for me, at that moment, conclusion was, since actually I could afford the iPad Pro, that's what I bought. But even then, let's get really detailed here. My budget would not stretch to the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro. I had to buy the 11-inch one. And those 2 inches, near enough, it makes a surprising, it makes a startling difference. Yeah, no, just how to explain it. A larger iPad screen is marvellous. It is like having 2 iPads side by side, and more than absorbing, more than compelling, actually. When you use a 12.9-inch screen, you feel as if you are inside your work. Apple, over the years, has talked a lot about how the iPad means you are touching the documents that you're writing, that you're touching the websites you're reading. And when you're doing it on a 12.9 or a 13-inch iPad, well, I think it's more. To me, it's like my hands are inside the work. It's like I'm kneading bread. That's what it feels like. I love that thing. An 11-inch iPad, even though that's only, 2 or 1.9 inches smaller, screen size measured on the diagonal, it doesn't have that extra thing. I am very pleased with my 11-inch iPad Pro, but it's true. I miss that larger size. Except, again, price can't be the only thing. A large iPad is harder to carry around. One reason for going for the iPad mini, actually, although again it hasn't been updated today, is it's the size of about a typical Kindle, and it can go in a pocket, or some pockets, or a bag, a handbag, easily. With the 12.9-inch iPad, you probably need a new bag. And then there's this on top of it, literally on top of it, around the iPad, the Magic Keyboard. This is a thing, no question. We are going to have to pop into an Apple store to see this for ourselves. Although, just to warn you, the last time I did that, I'll just have a look. Yeah, I came out with a Magic Keyboard. Yeah. Apple's Magic Keyboard, it's got a silly name and it's got a very high price compared to other keyboards, but for writing on, for the feel of typing on it, nothing else comes close. Magic Keyboards are superb. Plus, they give you a protective case for your iPad, although it's a wraparound thing, and they don't have a lot of corner or edge protection, so you could probably do better if you were looking for just a case. Nonetheless, once I'd paid over the money for a Magic Keyboard for my 11-inch iPad Pro, I wouldn't go back to anything else. And yet, I'm still conscious to this day that it is heavy. It makes my 11-inch iPad Pro hefty. And I've got to assume that it's worse with a 13-inch, but I mean just the sheer bulk of it wrapped around a large iPad Pro. I figure that has to be a problem. But Apple says, no, not with its new Magic Keyboard. Apple has launched a brand new Magic Keyboard made in a slightly different way and says that it's lighter. I don't know, we'll have to see. I do know that the Magic Keyboard costs $299 for the 11-inch model and $349 for the 13-inch model, and it appears to work with both the iPad Pro and the iPad Air models. Just before Magic Keyboards even existed, I used to carry around this gorgeous, light and small iPad Air, little size of it, and a separate Bluetooth keyboard. And whenever I needed to write anything more than I could, quickly or comfortably do by tapping away on the glass, well, I'd pop up the iPad Air, I'd get out the keyboard, and I'd happily do what we do. Although if what you do is handwriting, well then I am seriously, seriously envying you. But you can do more because there's a new Apple Pencil. There is one thing about the Apple Pencil, all of the Apple Pencils. Not all Apple Pencils work with all iPads, and I think that gets very confusing. If you get one of the new iPad Air or iPad Pro models and you want an Apple Pencil, well then you have to buy the new Apple Pencil Pro. It costs $129 a pound. That actually, though, is also the price of what used to be the top of the range, the Apple Pencil's second generation. Doesn't work with the new iPads. Look, this gets seriously confusing about which ones work with which iPads and which ones do not work with which iPads. And actually, sometimes even the naming is a problem. In any case, decide on the iPad that's right for you first, and then if you're going to use an Apple Pencil, get the one that says it works with that iPad. and really seriously check that it does. Although, just to help you, if you schlep through buying an iPad, or at least one of this week's new ones, because I did just check it out, the order page prompts you to buy an Apple Pencil. Go on, you want a pencil. And the one it prompts you for will be the right one for your iPad. But speaking of right, there's one more thing about all iPads that you've got to consider, the new ones now or any of them. As a writer, specifically as a writer just writing text on an iPad, I think you can get away with it thinking about this, but for anything else, if you illustrate your writing, if you do any photography work alongside your text, if you do much of anything at all other than just, then you need to know that Apple's From prices are always, of course, for the models with the least amount of storage possible, and that amount is always inadequate, or at the very best becomes so over the many years of use that you will get out of an iPad. So look to whatever the second tier of storage is on any iPad, because remember, you can't add storage later. And actually on the upside, the more storage you add now, it increases how much you can sell or trade in the iPad for in a few years, when Apple's persuaded you that you need to buy a new one. They will do it. They will. I'll tell you right now, even in just having seen them and wanting, I can mentally justify buying one of the new iPads when my 2021 11-inch iPad Pro is still so good. But I do want the 12.9 13-inch iPad Air. And I checked just now, Apple would give me a trade-in of about £300 towards it. I'll think on. One small thing. I was a little sarcastic, I thought, at the start about people with stopwatches or people who measure the pixels on an iPad screen. But I think actually, in the end, didn't I go a bit far down that line myself? It is easy to get lost in the details with iPads because for some reason with these, small differences do make a big impact. So let's pull this all back, right, all the way back. iPads are marvellous for writers, and I don't use that word lightly. I mean, it's a sheet of glass that you can write on and that can show you the world. I think one reason that there is no rival to the iPad, you could name me 1,000 Android tablets, but that's the thing, you'd have to name 1,000 of them and none, not a single one, actually stands up as an iPad rival for all time. Manufacturers of those other tablets, they concentrate on the pixels and the stopwatches. And right, doubtlessly Apple has a few stopwatches knocking around, but it seems to me that with the iPad, perhaps more than anything else that Apple does, what Apple does right is the whole package, the hardware and the software together. All iPads make it so that everything works so well that you stop thinking about the iPad, you're just thinking of what you're writing, of what you're creating, of what you're reading. And by making us forget the hardware, I don't know how they do it. I think Apple ultimately makes us appreciate the hardware. That's it for this edition of 58 Keys. Thank you very much for watching. Now take care of yourself, eh? Write more on an iPad or anything else you can, and I'll see you soon.